Women are often told, don't be too aggressive, don't be too confident, don't be too bold.
So how do we break this pattern then?
Personally, I think you should hire a mum because she is the best multitasker, negotiator, wearing all hats, juggling all the plates.
Are men more loyal to their employers than women, or is it the other way around?
The gap is still prominent, and I just think, what are we going to do to close the gap?
Welcome to Macroscope, your lens into real estate hiring and careers, brought to you by McDonald & Company.
Hi, I'm Vianney Dinnall-Sadler, an Associate Director at McDonald & Company, and I specialise in HR, business support and operations across BTR and PBSA.
Hi, I'm Hafsah Zubbair. I'm a consultant at McDonald & Company. I work in the housing sector across housing associations and local authorities. Real estate gender gap sits at 16%, which is above the national average of 13%. Why do you think the national average is higher in real estate than any other industry?
Well, the real estate industry has always been male-dominated, and I think they've worked really hard to attract more women in the industry, and that's definitely improving. But from our survey, we can see that there has been a gap across asset management, surveying, town planning, leasing, sales. So I think they're working really hard to improve that gender pay gap, but we've still got a lot of catching up to do.
From our recent salary survey, Vianney, we saw that men's median pay was £75,000 and women's was £63,000. That's a 16% gap. Do you think this is based on performance? What do you think this is based on?
I think it's about the role, how it's made up, the composition of the role, what sector it's in. And even before these bonus entitlements where men, their highest entitlement is up to 40% and women's highest entitlement is up to 30%. That's not even taken into account where employees are rewarded for going into work sick or unwell. And it's all about visibility versus output. So I think that's something to think about as well.
So when do you start to see the pay change?
Well, our research shows that these entry-level, junior-level roles, they kind of start on equal footing. Fresh out of university, grad, those salaries are pretty much standardized across the industry. But then it starts to split when you get to those senior, associate or middle management level types of roles. That's when it starts to generally have a little bit of a difference. And I think that comes down to the age at these types of roles. So, your late 20s, your early 30s, you start making decisions about, your career, your childcare, whether you want to start a family, motherhood, all of these things come into play. And I think that can create somewhat of a bit of a step back. It's quite unfortunate, actually, for women in their late 20s to early 30s to then start seeing that gap appear simply because of the gender that they were born into, because they want to maybe perhaps start a family. It can really change the trajectory of their career if they decide to leave work and have a baby. So I think, these things are definitely something for the industry to consider and definitely make a change.
So, Vianney, what do you think is driving this mid-career divergence?
So childcare costs play a huge factor for women returning to work after their maternity leaves. I think it's around 65% of women consider not even returning because of the cost of childcare. I know in the conversations I've had with women, they are considering taking a pay cut or they're just settling in a role when they know that they're at that level that they'd either be moving into a more senior position or, climbing the career ladder simply because the costs are too high. We don't even have to get into the conversation about childcare costs because I've been there. I've got a small child. But it's definitely something that has a huge impact on that divergence. For myself, I have the same issue. It's called the Pink Flamingo Effect or something along those lines, where you lose a sense of your identity. You know, if you've been out of work for long periods of time, and I've just got one child, but women are, you know, having bigger families. And, you know, if you're out of work for extended periods of time, you can lose your sense of self-worth, you know, understanding what your skill set is, understanding or even valuing what you bring to the table to organizations. Personally, I think you should hire a mum because she is the best multitasker, negotiator, wearing all different hats at once, juggling all the plates. But you do lose a sense of yourself, and you miss out on what's going on in the market. You don't really understand how much your skill set is valued at. What comes into play then when you're actually actively interviewing is you could negotiate less. You could, accept things that in the long run, you know, is not going to suit your lifestyle. So I had this one particular candidate who was coming back to work after her maternity leave, and she just wanted to get back into work as quickly as possible because, you know, she had twins. Her children were starting nursery. She had to obviously pay for those childcare fees, and her husband was in the office 5 days a week. So that flexibility as well, she needed lots of different things to be able to negotiate for, but she found herself kind of shying away and saying to me, oh, I'm not quite sure if I can ask for that, or I'm not quite sure if I will get that. They might retract the offer or whatever. But in the end, I just said to her, you can negotiate on all of these things and the right opportunity will come your way, but you really need to understand what your worth is in the market. Yes, you've been away from work for 12 months, 9 months, 10 months, whatever it is, but you still have so much to offer. And I think it's about coaching women through that piece to help them with their confidence.
So how does lack of confidence affect salary negotiation when coming back to work?
In many ways, I think when it comes to salary negotiation, I don't know if we've got stats on this, but typically we hear that men, when they're applying for jobs, they will apply for a job even if they don't tick all of the boxes. Whereas a woman may think, oh, I haven't quite got that skill set. I'm going to then do this training, or I'm going to, you know, speak to this person and get a bit of lived experience to then apply for the job. I think men sometimes are just a little bit faster out of the gate when it comes to that. I have found there's a lack of knowledge around what you can typically negotiate on. So the general understanding is that you just negotiate on your base salary, but you can actually negotiate on your job title. You can negotiate on your flexibility. You can negotiate on your salary review. You can negotiate on a holiday. There's so many things that you can negotiate on. And I don't think, again, the lack of confidence is for a mum returning to work is, I just need to secure a job that's going to be flexible for me, but you can negotiate on all these other things. And again, I think that just comes down to mindset and making sure this information is well known so the gap doesn't increase.
So according to our research, if we were to look at pay rises, if you were to move to a different company, the average would usually be around 24% of an increase. But if you were to stay in your company and receive a promotion, it would be roughly around 21%. Are men more loyal to their employers than women, or is it the other way around? And what is the impact of this?
So according to our research, we asked men and women, were they more likely to change career this year or move to a different employer? And 50% of men said yes, and 45% of women said yes, they would consider it. So there's definitely less of an appetite for women to change employer. And if women job hop less because they've found that stability in a particular role, they're more inclined to then miss out on market increases, market changes, where, you know, your role might increase by X% over a certain amount of time because they're being penalised for being loyal to an employer.
So how do we break this pattern then?
I think there needs to be transparency around salaries as a whole, whether it's standardised pay ranges or salary ranges. And not just based on previous roles, but based on experience. And that will really help with combating the negotiation bias.
So we touched on the motherhood penalty before. Are you seeing a gap on more higher up roles, so managing directors, board members? Are you seeing a gap between men and women on that?
Yeah, with senior leadership, definitely. I think the gap is it starts to widen from those associate mid-level roles. Typically we're finding men at those MD C-suite levels are typically on salaries around 170, whereas women are around 145,000. And even when you look at the whole compensation package, the other incentives that include, your bonuses, your L tips, all the other incentive options that you can get, the gap is still prominent. And I just think, what are we going to do to close the gap? So when we look at this model called the shift in standards model, where there's harsher, more critical criteria applied to women who are in positions of leadership, women are often, they have to prove themselves. They have to prove that they're competent in positions of leadership, whereas men benefit from just having that assumption that they're going to be great as leaders.
So when you said the shift in standards model, is that something that is actually in place? Or is that something that we as women have thought mentally, and it's something that we've put pressure on for ourselves to act in a place where we're more leader-like?
Yeah, I think it comes down to societal conditioning. It's on a subconscious level as well. Women are often told, don't be too aggressive, don't be too confident, don't be too bold, wait until you've got something really important to say. And I think all of those things matter to some degree. It's a delicate dance, but at the same time, men don't have they don't have that mindset. They just speak. They are courageous, they're bold, and they're not being told that they're too aggressive. Whereas a woman in leadership might be told she's too aggressive, but a man wouldn't be told that. So there's different standards. And again, that shift in standards model, it's harsher for women.
Right. So we've just spoken about fairness. Does it benefit a business financially to have more of a diverse team where men and women are together?
Yes, for those senior leadership roles, if your business has a more diverse board, then the research shows that there's a 27% increase in financial performance. They're going to outperform themselves if they have a more diverse board.
So why don't they hire more women?
It comes into play with all the things that we've spoken about, the motherhood penalty, taking a break from work, the childcare costs, having a step back in your career once you actually are ready to return to work, not having the confidence enough to negotiate what you want, to be in the room, to be at the table. All of these things are going to come into play, hence why the gap is so wide, why there's less women in those senior leadership positions or having a seat at the table at the boards.
Flexible working hasn't disappeared, but the autonomy is shrinking. So last year it was 30% with the choice of either coming into the office or working from home. But this year it is now 23%.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's definitely shrinking. I mean, it hasn't disappeared. There are still, many companies, and if we're talking strictly real estate, that flexibility still exists. It definitely does exist here. But I think for women, what companies will be facing is a retention issue. 60% of women say if there's more stricter mandates, it's more likely to negatively impact them. And 50% of women are saying they're considering leaving the real estate industry altogether because of the inflexibility when it comes to working from home or being in the office. I think the childcare piece comes back into play for that, because your children are in nursery, they're in school, the working day is 9 to 5 or 9 to 6. But the school day or the nursery day, if it's term time only, is 8:30 to 3:30. So women do need that flexibility, but I do also believe that it's not just about women, it's a wider conversation. Men need to be brought into this conversation as well, because women aren't the only parents. There are men in this as well. So I think we can go into this in more detail later. I'm sure it's going to come up, but I think we need to bring men into the conversation when it comes to the flexibility piece as well. It's not just women that will be affected in the long run, it will be men.
I mean, I definitely see a pushback on my side in public sector. So a lot of people in the housing associations or local authorities, they use their 5 days a week. They can pretty much live their lives while also working. And there's been a pushback. So a lot of people are being told to come to the office, and a lot of people are not happy with that, mainly the women.
I'm seeing it across the board. You know, I'm working on a couple of roles at the moment where the roles are 5 days a week in the office, and it shrinks the pool dramatically, depending on where the location is as well. If it's more of a regional role versus a London-based role, you know, you have to consider the cost, the travel, the commute. All of these things are going to come into play. But I think, again, the childcare piece, you know, nursery drop-offs and school pickups and all of these things, you have to consider it to be more flexible if you want to keep your women in your workplaces.
Yeah, I mean, we spoke about last week when we were complaining about prices of everything, your after-school club, your breakfast club, just for you to come into the office quite a lot of the time, it seems.
Yeah, it cost me like almost £50 to be in the office for the days that I am in the office, and I live in London. How much does it cost you?
£600 a month.
Yeah.
If I'm here 4 days a week.
Yeah.
But it's way too much than it should ever be to just come in and do what you could be doing from home, but from a desk.
Yeah.
So what's a healthy middle ground if you were to come into the office or work from home? What do you think gives the professional structure of your work?
I mean, this is dependent on the role. You know, I work across operations roles, and some of these roles are on site. You have to be on site 5 days a week. But for the roles that aren't on site based, I don't know, 2 to 3 days is what I'm finding the general consensus when I'm speaking to candidates. You know, women will face less promotion opportunities because they're seen as being less physically present, because they don't have the flexibility to be in the office 5 days a week because their lifestyles and their families don't allow it. Women don't generally shout about their achievements too much. So if they're missing out on opportunities because they're not physically present in the office to move up in their careers, and they're not shouting about their achievements, then you're left behind.
So what should leaders do to accommodate this problem?
Definitely model it. Leave loudly, talk about, you know, I need to go collect the kids. I need to go and attend my child's school play. My child is sick. I need to go and pick them up. Just being very visible and leading by example, and not shirking away from the fact that you have family. And I think that's done really well here, I must say that. But yeah, I just think leading by example and not having flexibility as some kind of dirty little secret. It's more of, this is what my life is like and this is how I work, and I'm still able to do my job really well.
So a lot of real estate professionals are not feeling as valued as they did last year. So last year it was 59% that felt valued, and now it's dropped down to 49%. What do you think about that?
So women pretty much just want to be seen and heard. And I think in the workplace, we end up picking up additional work because, you know, society says do more and you get more and be more and all of this stuff. So I think we end up having this invisible workload at home and also in the workplace as well. And women can end up having the title without the influence, you know, at senior levels, you know, at board levels, being that seat at the table, being at the table, but not really having their voice heard or their opinions welcomed. And I had this one candidate who was on the board at her company within real estate, but she was left out of important discussions and important business meetings. And I think those types of conversations that I'm having as well are confidential, so the information is not getting out there that these things are happening. So again, how do we make the change if these conversations are confidential? What situations like this are actually happening?
So when you say they don't feel seen or heard, how far do you think praise or approval would make them feel a lot more valued and a lot more confident in what they're doing day to day at their job?
I think everyone wants praise and approval, to some degree, you know.
Yeah.
But I think it's important, but it needs to be a blanket approach, not just one isolated situation. It needs to be embedded into the culture of the business. If we're going to praise and approve X person, we need to praise and approve when this person does this. And it needs to, I think it really needs to be embedded into the culture.
So what will actually make people feel valued in their role?
Well, from our research, we can see that recognition and strong relationships with managers really help people feel valued. It's important, don't you think? You should get on really well with the people you work with, especially your manager or the person that you report into. Then it makes your job feel valuable and you feel valued. And then I think when we're looking at some cultures where bravado culture might be quite strong, that will create a bit of a dissonance. I think people will be less comfortable sharing their accolades. If there's someone shouting from the rooftops, oh, I've done this, I've done that, it kind of makes everyone feel a little bit less valued. So I think women are more likely just to get on with it, keep their head down, keep going. And again, this might be a generalization, but this is what I've seen and heard and experienced. Whereas men are happy to shout about what they've done and what they've achieved. So that praise and approval piece definitely ties into what you were saying. I think it's important.
Beyond praise and approval, what else could employers do to make women feel valued?
Women, we're nuanced, right? First of all, hormonally, right? We have an infradian rhythm, whereas men have the same hormonal rhythm every 24 hours. We are changing throughout a cycle. So I think there's pieces that can definitely help make women feel more valued. What do you think about that?
Yes, I completely agree with everything that you just said. I do think it's really important when employers put things to make women feel more comfortable. Like, example, if you go into the bathroom, there'll be menstrual products. If you want to take a leave, if you've got really bad cramps or you're suffering, you want to go home, then they can offer that to you. What do you think?
Yeah, I think hormonal health in the workplace is fundamental to retain women in the workplace. And I think that is something that the real estate industry should really consider and have it as a driver of employee branding even. I know here our HR, Ruth, she has a whole menopause toolkit and resources on women's health, and it's something that she's really passionate about. And I think, the more women that come into real estate and hopefully stay, then that is something that will make them feel valued in the long run, because we're not one-dimensional.
Yeah. AI is reshaping work and unevenly. So 52% of people in real estate are adopting AI into their day-to-day work life, and women are using AI 25% less than men. What do you think the outcome of that is going to be if it carries on?
I think the early adoption piece is critical. You have to get on board, otherwise you will be left behind. 51% of women who use AI in the workplace feel more confident in their work, and that confidence is just going to have a ripple effect. You're going to be more confident, ask what you want, get promotions, get that seat at the table, hopefully. But you need to adopt it early. And I don't think it's about, whether you know how to use it. It's about, do you have access to it? Do you have exposure to it? Do you see it as something scary that's going to take over the world? Or do you see it as a tool that you can use to help you get ahead and also be more of an expert in your field?
And how does this impact the leadership pipeline for women?
When it comes to those entry-level roles, I think that's what's going to have more of an impact with what AI will take over. So if women aren't adopting AI earlier in their careers and they're not becoming tech savvy enough, then eventually those entry-level roles will disappear. Not to scare everybody, but I think the early adoption piece is really important if you're a woman and you're at the beginning of your career.
So what does AI adoption look like at the top of the career ladder?
It's definitely the more junior, middle management levels that are adopting AI the most, and the strategies set by MD, C-suite, and they're the ones that are using it less.
Yeah, from our survey data, I can see that only 14% of employers have reported their companies are upskilling their staff on AI.
Yeah, if there's only 14% of companies that are upskilling their staff, then it's something so important as AI, which has been adopted across the world in the workplace, has become embedded in our day-to-day lives. If women aren't upskilling, learning, adopting it, because that gap within pay will just widen.
So do you think it's then mandatory that employers should put in workshops for AI to not only show women, but to show the teams that everyone's learning at the exact same pace and everyone knows exactly what they're going to be doing using AI with their work?
Yeah, absolutely. But I think there's a willingness as well. It has to come down to your own self-motivation. Do you want to get ahead or do you want to get left behind? Because the way you're going to get ahead is by adopting AI, whether you're in real estate or not.
This year's International Women's Day theme is Give to Gain, and we have gone through a couple topics which fit right into that. Do you want to have a quick recap on what we've gone through today?
Yeah, I think there were solutions to give to gain and how employers can adopt that as a mantra, maybe. There are 3 core levers that we can kind of pull on the things we've discussed today. So the first one being pay and progression, being really transparent about pay ranges and bonuses and how they structure them, so that women aren't disadvantaged the more they move up the career ladder. And then return to office and flexibility. Flexibility is not a perk. It's a fundamental part of retention and performance, and especially so that women who are responsible for the caregiving responsibilities in their families, again, they're not left behind and that gap widens. And then AI upskilling. Women should be encouraged to upskill in AI, adopt it early, have that confidence to perhaps even ask their employer, can I upskill in this area? So that as they, again, move up the career ladder into those senior C-suite, MD level roles, they're not shirking away from using AI, especially if they're the ones that are setting the strategy. I think it will really help when it comes to the future of work if everyone feels confident in using AI. If the insights we've shared today around compensation, mid-career challenges and workplace culture resonated with you, head to the show description. If you'd like support with hiring, retention or building a more equitable workplace, visit mcdonaldandcompany.com/contact. Subscribe to McDonald & Co on YouTube for more episodes of The Macroscope. You can also find us on Spotify.